Blood Brothers podcast, a Five Pillars of Mad Monolith production.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh, dear brothers, sisters, friends and foes out there, and welcome to another episode of the Blood Brothers podcast with your host, Dilly Hussein. Today I have a very esteemed guest, a very celebrated figure of the Muslim community, someone who as a young teen grew up watching the debates with the Christians, so I don't know what that means in terms of age for our guest, and that is none other than my dear brother, Ustad Adnan Rashid. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. I am getting old.
You don't look it though. You were ripping the way I was looking. You look younger than me.
As they say, beauty is in the eye of the beholder.
Oh, mashallah.
It depends who's looking at me.
Do you do any paintwork on the hair?
No.
So that's pure natural black?
Yes. Natural beauty.
Mashallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Adnan, let me kick off today's podcast by setting a scenario. You're on a boat trip on your own for 7 days. And I'm going to give you two options. You have to choose one. So think of a 7-day boat ride on your own. Theek? Doodh patti or pink tea?
Doodh patti.
Naan or roti?
Roti.
Chicken or lamb?
Lamb.
Halwa or kheer?
Halwa.
Books of theology or books of history?
History.
7 days with Imam Ahmad rahimahullah or Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah?
Imam Ahmad.
Imam Ahmad rahimahullah or Shah Waliullah Dehlawi rahimahullah?
Imam Ahmad.
Muhammad Ali Jinnah or Allama Iqbal?
Iqbal.
Dr. Zakir Naik or Dr. Israr Ahmad?
Dr. Israr Ahmad.
Sultan Aurangzeb or Khalif Abdul Hamid?
Aurangzeb.
Very interesting. Quite. Those responses were...
I can qualify every single one of those choices.
Okay, so let me...
And each one of those requires a podcast in itself.
Okay, so just very briefly, I can understand Imam Ahmad, the Don of the Hanbali, the founder of the
He
Hanbali.
made Ibn Taymiyyah.
Exactly, khalas.
So why would you go to the product?
So Jinnah, when you said Allama Iqbal over Muhammad Ali Jinnah, why is that?
Iqbal made Jinnah.
And
Iqbal went to Jinnah and invited him to get involved in the politics. Of course, Jinnah was already involved, but he had given up. Iqbal inspired him to come back and lead the Muslims.
And why Israr Ahmad over Dr. Zakir Naik?
Because Dr. Israr Ahmad had a deeper knowledge of the Quran than Dr. Zakir Naik has. Both are very valuable, of course, but I would say Dr. Israr Ahmad was a lot bigger scholar, theologically speaking, than Dr. Zakir Naik is.
Now I presented Sultan Aurangzeb, rahimahullah, against Khalif Abdul Hamid, who's also equally, if not a greater giant of modern Islamic history. Is that because of your Mughal history bias you chose Aurangzeb?
Potentially, yes.
Yeah.
Partly because of that, and partly because I believe Aurangzeb achieved more than Sultan Abdul Hamid as a ruler. Yes.
As a ruler?
As a ruler, yes.
Okay, we can touch upon that.
He had more control over his domain than Sultan Abdul Hamid did.
Really?
Yeah, Aurangzeb acquired territory, didn't lose it. Sultan Abdul Hamid unfortunately lost
territory. This is true.
Yeah.
This is true.
Yeah.
When I met you 3-4 days ago, at the time of the recording of this podcast, there was the assassination of Iran's top military general, Qasem Soleimani, by America. And of course, it's caused a massive controversy and discussion in the region and beyond about whether the death of this major general, who's considered the second most powerful person in Iran, what it means for the region. Now, there's an interesting thing that you said to me. Was he a sacrificial giving from Iran to America to advance its agenda in the region? Can you elaborate on what you meant by that?
Firstly, let me clarify that there are two perspectives on General Soleimani. One perspective is the Iranian state perspective, not necessarily the perspective of the people. The state perspective is that he was a hero of Islam. He fought for Iranian interest in the region. He was heading many conflicts on the part of the Iranian government in Yemen, in Syria, in Iraq, most importantly. And for that reason, he was a hero for the Iranian regime, the current Iranian regime. I separate the people from the regime because the people can differ with the regime. And many do, as we know from recent events, that there were protests in Iran Many thousands were killed, depending on perspectives, again, depending on who's reporting. It could be hundreds, it could be thousands. And at the same time, people can be on the side of the regime. As we know, hundreds of thousands turned up for his funeral.
It was massive.
He was clearly very popular among hundreds of thousands of people. So that cannot be ignored. That's one perspective, that he was a hero. He did his job to the best of his ability. He gave his life, the best part of his life, to the cause of the Iranian Revolution, which started in 1979. And this is one perspective. The other perspective is the larger regional, if you call it the Sunni perspective. Okay, the Sunni perspective on this person is completely the opposite. That he butchered hundreds of thousands of people in Syria. He's responsible for the conflict in Yemen, which is causing hundreds of thousands of deaths because of starvation, because of other limits or other problems caused by war in that region. He was responsible for killings of Sunnis in Iraq. And when I say Sunnis, I don't mean ISIS. Of course, the credit must be given where it's due. Iran must be credited for fighting ISIS.
But there is a conflation with certain pro-Iran elements where fighting Daesh literally becomes a justification of cleansing Sunni towns and villages, right?
Well, it did for some reason, unfortunately, in Iraq. And these reports cannot be ignored because this is not rhetoric, or this is not just these are not rumors.
No, Human Rights Watch issued reports
exactly on Iraq death squads, and there were Iranian militias.
Mosul, Ambar, entire towns.
The backlash fell on innocent Sunni inhabitants of Mosul and Baghdad, and even places like Fallujah. Okay, people who had nothing to do with war in general, and they were treated as ISIS. But if you looked at the reality carefully, those people hated ISIS as much as anyone else would do, right? So fighting ISIS does not become a justification to completely eradicate Sunni influence or existence from Iraq. Okay, so these are some of the things he was seen to have done, and this is the Sunni perspective, which I have come to, read recently on online and offline, in newspapers and news reports. Many documentaries have come out since he has passed away. So he has left two legacies behind, depending on who's looking at him. The Iranian regime, or people who support the Iranian regime perspective, and the other perspective is the largest Sunni world perspective, where people see him as a war criminal, as a murderer, as a mass murderer. So it depends.
How would you then respond to then, in that case, when we've had the likes of Recep Tayyip Erdogan, who sent his condolences to Iran, reportedly referred to Soleimani as a shaheed. We had Hamas, Ismail Haniyeh, who was there at the funeral himself, and certain resistance groups within Palestine who have voiced their support and condolences. We've had no real voice of opposition and condemnation from any Sunni leadership. Yes, from the masses, sure. The people of Idlib were celebrating, they were giving sweets out.
Even Iraq, even the Shias in Iraq were celebrating.
Really?
Yes. It was reported by Al Jazeera. There are people on the streets of Baghdad celebrating his death. Shias. These are not Sunnis. Because there are Shia people in Iraq who want Iran out. And Soleimani's death meant that this would potentially cause Iran to leave Iraq.
But we've not really had any voice. The position that you've presented, which is widely seen as the Sunni position, which, by the way, I tend to agree with, right? But nevertheless, playing devil's advocate, we've not seen any voice of Sunni leadership come out and say, this man was a
Just
criminal.
to clarify, by the way, I do not agree with any extrajudicial killing by anyone anywhere in the world. So by that virtue, the killing, the assassination was an act of barbarity. It was unlawful, in my personal opinion.
No, it's a legit opinion.
I don't believe Donald Trump's justification for what he did. Okay, this man had worked previously with America. Iran was an ally of the US in Iraq. Both entities were fighting ISIS collectively. Iran was doing the dirty work of the US in Iraq.
So what if you made them turn then? What do you
I don't know if they have turned against each other. I don't believe it.
Okay, not necessarily turn, but what do you think triggered the assassination of Qasem Soleimani?
This is a very good question. I don't always believe what I hear on the news. I mean, I take a lot of the news I hear on mainstream channels with a pinch of salt. One of the commentators, his name is Bashar, he's a very big Middle East expert on Al Jazeera. I don't know if you know him. Marwan, I think his name is Marwan Bashar.
Go on, we can slip his name at the bottom of the screen.
Yeah. He came up with a very interesting theory that this could be a reason why Iran would have a respite in the region, because Iran was losing its hold on power because the people were rising against the regime in Iran, within Iran, as we have seen by recent protests, and people were rising against Iranian influence in Iraq. So this could be a way of
bringing the nation together.
Raising the nationalistic feeling.
Yeah.
Death to America slogans.
And therefore,
and that unites the nation. Hundreds of thousands of people will come together at the funeral, and they will express their condolences for the family as well as the regime for losing such a powerful man, such an important figure of the regime. And this will raise the feeling of nationalism, and it will inflate the feeling of hatred against the US, and that would strengthen the regime by extension. This was a possible interpretation of the events. But I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm just trying to make sense of it.
Okay.
That how can suddenly things go bitter? How can they go bitter like that?
What's your views on the 22 missile attacks which killed no American soldiers?
Well, my view is very much inclined to what some of the reports have stated, that Iran intentionally fired missiles at a facility where there was no one there, as if to deliberately avoid casualties, so that the US does not retaliate with a bigger attack.
I think there's definitely way more to this incident than what meets the eye.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
There is no shadow of a doubt that Iran has played a key role in the region, which in some instances was in absolute accordance with American policy within the region.
Yeah.
The fall of Taliban, the fall of Saddam. These are two wars which actually strengthened the Iranian government and its position within the region. However, we are still left with a wide perception that Iran is the bulwark and the symbol of anti-imperialism in the region, right? And this is echoed by their support, material and financial, of the Palestinian resistance, namely Islamic Jihad and Hamas. And there's still many Sunnis who subscribe to this thinking. For example, I was looking at the Pakistani press, and I was looking at Pakistani commentators, and they were very mournful over the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. The Dawn, the Jung newspaper.
It was mixed. In Pakistan, the reaction was mixed.
But there was a fair amount of, at least from the liberal establishment,
yes,
right?
Yes.
That Qasem Soleimani's assassination was something that was bad and should be condemned. So there is still this perception that
I say that. I say that any extrajudicial killing conducted by anyone is to be condemned. So it is unlawful. So we live, or we claim to live in a civilized world which is governed by laws, international laws, and those laws cannot be transgressed. Just because someone is powerful doesn't mean you can do what you want. But you may hate someone, but there is a due process of law. We have to follow it.
Isn't it frustrating that the lawmakers themselves are the ones that always break the law?
Yes, I mean, I was shocked when Trump said that he will potentially bomb cultural sites, which is absolutely shocking. This is what ISIS was doing. I mean, I was really devastated when I saw ISIS raiding some of these historic sites. Being a historian, being a student of history, you can imagine what I went through, right? Of course, the human loss is one thing, okay? But history cannot be made again, okay? History, it cannot be reinvented, okay? If you have lost historical objects, if you have lost historical evidence, it is lost forever. You will never recover it again, unfortunately. So I was devastated by that. For the US president to make a statement like that, it was very shocking for myself, right? So law cannot be broken. You can't break the law when you feel that you hate someone and you want to take action and you want to really hurt them. by attacking the cultural sites or attacking the civilians, for that matter, or attacking hospitals and schools and civilian institutions. This is not allowed. This shouldn't be allowed. In fact, the world should unite against such behavior.
Do you think Sunnis, at least in Syria and Iraq, and those who have felt the brunt of the Iranian regime's policies in those countries, do you think we should support an American-led war against Iran?
I don't think we should support any power in that region. We should support peace, harmony. What we should ask for is dismantling of arms, foreign armies leaving those lands, going back to their homelands, leaving this region to itself, and let the leaders of these regions decide what the fate of the region is. We have too many players, foreign players, testing their weapons on innocent people. We have Russia in there, we have the US in there, we have Britain in there, we have France in there. These are very powerful nations with deadly weapons, and some of them are actually testing their weapons on this region. We are not guinea pigs. People of this region, the Muslims, have had enough. So they must leave the region, and there shouldn't be a war. We shouldn't take sides against anyone, no matter how much we hate. We might hate one party, for example, against the other, and we might start thinking of supporting one party against the other. We shouldn't do that. Again, what's going to happen? The powerful, they won't suffer. Trump will be in his office. The Iranian regime, the current Iranian political establishment, they won't be harmed. It's the people. It's the innocent people in Iran, in Iraq, or in the wider Middle East. They're going to suffer. They will be bombed. They will be starved. They will be like what's happening in Yemen right now. So this is why I believe Iran should pull out of Yemen. It should pull out of Syria. It should pull out of Iraq, and let there be peace. I believe both of these powers have caused immense damage to the peace of the region.
Now, obviously, moving a bit more closer to home, India. Now, since Modi ji has been in power, India has taken quite a nasty turn, right? Where many of these sentiments, these anti-Muslim, Islamophobic sentiments, what I would humbly argue were always there in Indian society, has now become very apparent. And the ugly underbelly of kind of a Hindutva, RSS kind of ideology has now become very apparent, especially in state policy. So we've had the Citizenship Amendment Act, which basically states that any migrants or refugees from Pakistan, Bangladesh, or Afghanistan that are Hindu, Sikh, Jain, or Christian will be given citizenship, explicitly excluding Muslims. Then we've had the National Register of Citizenship, which was rolled out in Assam, potentially looking at 1.9 million people, predominantly Muslims of Bengali ethnicity, that are going to be in detention camps. Last year, earlier on, we had the revoking of Article 370 and 35A in Kashmir. And within a space of a year, we're seeing all these kind of policies. What is the future looking like for Muslims of India, which numbers more than Bangladesh and Pakistan?
The future looks very grim. And this is the future the founding fathers of Pakistan could envision in the earlier part of the 20th century. They could see this coming. Hence the necessity of Pakistan. That's why Pakistan and Bangladesh was created, because those founding fathers could not trust the majority Hindu rule, because it could go anywhere. It could go towards secularism, which it did for a few decades, or it could also go towards extreme right-wing
Hindu nationalism, which is what we're seeing right now.
The rise of Hindu nationalism. And Modi had a landslide victory, and democracy has failed, unfortunately. It has failed globally.
Are we saying democracy has failed? Let's say talk about India specifically. Are we saying democracy has failed because the Indians chose their leader in landslide?
No, I'm saying democracy has failed as a system globally. If this is what democracy is, if this is what it does, then it has to be reviewed. If democracy brings people like Modi to power, someone who was accused of genocide in Gujarat in 2003, if democracy can bring someone like Trump to power, who was accused of abusing women and using vulgar language against
all kinds
minorities,
of people. Women,
and blacks,
disability,
and
blacks,
Mexicans,
Hispanic, Muslims,
and
everyone.
he has hurt every single entity on the planet.
But he is representative of a large constituency of his voters.
Well, this is why Iqbal, the philosopher of the East,
Rahimahullah.
stated, rahmatullah alayh, in a very powerful stanza, that एक मर्द फरंगी ने किया मुझ पे राज ये फाश कि हर चंद दाना इसे खोला नहीं करते जमहूरियत जो तर्ज हुकूमत है इसमें बंदों को गिना करते हैं तोला नहीं करते.
Translation, please.
Translation is that an Englishman, he exposed this secret to me, as not very often the wise reveal it to others, that democracy is a way of governing in which you count people, you don't weigh them. So when you start counting, when a philosopher's vote or when a scholar's vote is equal to someone some like this is same what Plato criticized in democracy in his Republic. Okay, Republic is one of the best critiques of democracy.
Okay.
It is one of the best critiques of democracy. This is what he said, that in a democratic system, someone who has no knowledge, has no awareness,
his vote is equal to that
equal
of a
to
thinker.
someone who is a thinker, someone who is educated, someone who's a philosopher. This is not fair. This is absolutely devastating, and this is exactly what we're seeing right now. In this system, the current system we have in the world, masses can be manipulated by newspapers, by power, by money, by glitter, by spectacle, right? And they can be conditioned into voting for some of the worst people in the society. And this is exactly what we're seeing right now. Okay, we're seeing the embodiment of that failure of democracy in these people.
If you could have the ears of the leadership of different Indian Muslim communities, whether it be ulama, whether it be political leaders, if you had their ears for 5 minutes, what advice would you give them? Just from your own perspective as a historian, as someone who follows the events of the region quite closely, in terms of, I know it's very, for me to say Adnan Rashid give an action plan for the Muslims of India is quite crazy, but if you could share some thoughts with the leadership of the Muslims of India regarding the current situation, what would it be without rubbing in their face that, hey, look, this is what Pakistan was, because I'm seeing that a lot. I'm seeing a number of commentators and even lay Muslims who are from Pakistan that, hey, look, this was the wisdom of Jinnah Sahib, and look, this is why Pakistan was created, etc. And I feel that's a bit, whilst you can appreciate that from a hindsight perspective, when Muslims of India are literally being lynched up and down the country.
Yes, they are.
To tell them, by the way, guys, look, this is why Pakistan was created. I feel that's a bit, just rubbing salt on the wound, and it could even make them entrenched even further in, we are proud to be Indian Muslim. So what could you potentially tell the Muslims of India, their leadership, with regards to...
I would tell them, immediately unite. Unite without delay, and do not stop your movement. Do not be discouraged by accusations, by misrepresentations of the regime against the Muslims, and unite with the non-Muslims. Because there are many non-Muslims in India who are very moral, ethical, they're very upright in their politics, and they are the ones who are defending the Muslims now. Muslims have effectively become second-class citizens after the passing of this bill. Now, by law, Muslims are now second-class citizens.
Literally.
Well, literally, absolutely. If you are passing a law and you are completely excluding an entire minority from a country, from a large country, the largest minority, which runs into hundreds of millions. If you are excluding them from a law, you are discriminating against them based upon religion. They become effectively second-class citizens. People talk about ISIS. People are talking about Taliban videos from the 90s where they were beating people in the streets. And there was so much noise about that on CNN, on NBC, Fox News, BBC, Sky News. All of these international channels are running shows, talk shows, debates. on the barbarity of the East.
For months on end.
For example, absolutely.
For months
it
on
hasn't
end.
stopped.
Yeah.
Right? There are lynching videos coming out of India. There are people who are being killed, and these people are not even hiding their faces. Those who are doing the killings, right? They are killing in the name of Hinduism, and they are not 1, 2, 3.
There's many.
We are talking about hundreds of thousands of people who actually sympathize with that view. India needs to be reconditioned. The minds of the people in India, they need to be reconditioned. They need to be re-educated because they have been radicalized. They are Hindu ISIS. I'm sorry to use the language, but they are Hindu ISIS. They are Hindu Nazis. The current regime governing India, the BJP regime.
But would the comparison, I know why you made the comparison, but ISIS, let's be frank about it, is still a fringe, beyond fringe.
Absolutely.
Whereas this is mainstream.
Yes, unfortunately, that's the problem.
This is mainstream.
That's the problem. This is why it's more dangerous.
ISIS was never mainstream.
This is an alarming situation.
ISIS ideology, their fiqh, whatever it was,
has
never
been
fringe.
rejected.
Been rejected.
It has been rejected by 99.9% of
Whereas
the Muslims.
Hindutva, RSS, BJP ideology is mainstream.
Has a wide support from Canada, from the US. Why are these people not... Okay, look, in the West, Muslims are always taunted. Why don't you do enough against extreme? And we are screaming and shouting from our mosques, from the pulpit,
Yep.
from our scholars to our lay people are saying, hold on, these people are your product. They have nothing to do with our civilization. ISIS is not our civilization
I've
produced.
not seen that from Hindu representative groups.
They
Generally
are
speaking,
openly celebrating
Yes.
it's like Hitler when he came to power in 1933.
Yep.
Okay, you can call it a sham election or whatever. It was a rigged election or it was influenced.
He still had a massive constituency of support.
absolutely. He was very popular as a leader. That doesn't make him right.
Yeah.
Okay. Likewise, on a bigger scale, unfortunately, what's happening in this case, in the case of India and BJP governing India, okay, it is very clear some of the major players, some of the major ministers and politicians are using extremely vulgar, divisive, genocidal language against the Muslim population, if not others. Okay, people like Yogi Adityanath,
Yes.
okay, the chief minister,
of Uttar
the
Pradesh.
CM of Uttar Pradesh, the largest province of India. That province alone has as much population as Pakistan has. It's over 200 million people in that particular province. He is governing the largest population in India. He is clearly, openly making genocidal statements, biased, prejudiced statements. He's justifying his behavior. He's justifying the police. We have seen the videos coming out where police in this particular province is going into Muslim properties, smashing cars,
throwing stones, shooting, raping,
terrorizing,
Yeah.
terrorizing a population of millions. We're not talking about a neighborhood. We're not talking about a town. We're talking about millions of people are being terrorized systematically by the state apparatus. We have thousands of policemen walking into Muslim neighborhoods, smashing properties, cars, houses, windows, walking into homes, beating people up, women and children. We have seen all these videos come out. No one can deny. Thanks to social media, thanks to Facebook and YouTube and all that. Okay, all of this has come out. They cannot deny it.
We saw what happened in Aligarh Muslim University, Jamia Islamia University, where they were going into campuses. They were beating up peaceful protesters.
And Jawaharlal Nehru University
recently as well.
Recently, where some of the
thugs.
Indian celebrities. They have come out. Some of the actors, they have come out and they supported. So a lot of good people, moral people, are supporting Muslims in this. Muslims should take full advantage of this for the goodness of India. What do we want for India? We the Muslims globally, the Ummah. What do we want for India? India is a beautiful country. It is rich in history. Muslims governed India for nearly 1,000 years. Parts of India, and Muslims governed India with love. Although there are haters on the other side who claim that India was devastated by Muslim invasions, India was mistreated by Muslims, Indian populations were devastated,
colonized, looted, oppressed,
oppressed, all of that. But let me tell you something, just to refute this particular claim. Muslim sultans during the Delhi Sultanate period,
who were Mamluks, right?
The Mamluks of India, right? They were Muslims, and they were the most powerful entities, politically speaking and militarily speaking, in India for almost 2 centuries, okay, if not more. The 13th and the 14th century, both centuries, much of these centuries were spent by the sultans defending India
Against Mongols.
against the Mongols. The Mongols invaded India at times on yearly basis, sometimes monthly basis. Mongols did not disappear. Sultan Ghiyasuddin Balban, right? He lost his son in a battle against Mongols. His heir apparent, someone who was supposed to succeed his father, and he never recovered from this loss. So Sultan died in grieving for his son, right? Then came the Khiljis, okay? Khiljis fought the Mongols, okay? People can claim, oh, they were defending their own government, their own power. But no. They were defending India. You can't, because there were Hindus in the armies. This was not a purely Muslim establishment. The Delhi Sultanate had Hindu generals fighting side. The same with the Mughals. The Mughals had Hindu Rajput and Jat at times, generals fighting side by side with the Mughals against the enemies. Okay, some of the biggest generals in the Mughal armies were Hindus.
So how do you counter the fact that whilst they were defending India against Mongols and foreign invaders, that when they weren't doing that, they were too busy isolating and disenfranchising and oppressing Hindus? That when they weren't doing that,
if they were oppressing Hindus, why would they have Hindus in their armies as generals? It's a good question, isn't it? It's a question. If they were were those Hindus siding with them? No. These were times, very, very disturbing times, barbaric times, uncivilized times. There was no international law governing countries and kings and armies. Okay, and if you look at the Muslim period, okay, comparatively, it was a lot more peaceful when you look at the larger scale. Okay, of course, Muslims never had peace in this region.
And it was never utopian.
The Middle Ages were full of wars, rebellions,
and there was no such period as a utopian period.
No, there's no utopia.
There is no utopia.
Absolutely, it doesn't exist. What we have to see is the behavior of the Muslim sultans comparatively against those who were there in India. For example, from the Hindu background. Okay, because Hindus were the majority even then. So Muslims did not have this policy of oppressing or suppressing Hindus. They never had this policy. In fact, this is why some of the founding fathers of Pakistan, having studied the history of India carefully, they knew anytime, unfortunately, some of the Hindus came to power.
Who would you regard as the founding fathers of Pakistan? Beyond Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who were the founding fathers?
I would say, if you were to go back in history, I would say Shah Waliullah laid the foundations. Okay, he gave the political theory to the Muslims of India. How to govern effectively, how to govern justly. Very importantly, in his books like Hujjatullah al-Baligha and his encyclopedia called Izalatul Khifa an Khilafatil Khulafa, where he defended the concept of Khilafah in Islam and what an ideal Khilafah should look like. Just because someone claims to be a Khalifa doesn't make him a Khalifa. Like ISIS Caliphate is not a caliphate. We don't accept it as a caliphate.
Of course not.
Okay, they claimed it. If you wear a badge that I'm a surgeon or I'm
doesn't make you a surgeon.
I mean, it does. If you're a cobbler, okay. If you're someone who's a butcher from an abattoir, okay, and you claim to be a surgeon, just by the virtue of cutting things up, right? You don't become a surgeon. You're a butcher, right? Likewise, Shah Waliullah, he gave a proper theory of a proper caliphate.
Anyone else?
Okay. At that time in India,
just a bit like over a period.
I mean, if you go back, of course, there are so many other individuals. Ibn Taymiyyah, Imam al-Mawardi, and Imam Ghazali.
Okay, forget about more towards the theory that Pakistan, or there should be a separate state for Muslims to survive in this region.
Shah Waliullah did not necessarily talk about the separation. Okay, he talked about the necessity of holding on to power to maintain peace and justice. His view was that if Muslims governed by the rules of Islam properly, India will become a peaceful abode, not only for Muslims, but non-Muslims. Okay,
But was
Shah Waliullah had seen the time of Aurangzeb when he was a child.
But Maududi was of a similar opinion. He believed that Muslims should remain as part of India because eventually we can rule India like we have done for centuries.
Under a democracy it would be impossible because the British colonial establishment would leave democracy behind because that's what they planned. Although they were themselves ruling by dictatorship because colonialism is by default dictatorship, right? But when they would leave India, they would leave it as a democracy.
And therefore, demographically,
Muslims would be worse off, and Muslims would have lost severely. And these arguments that collectively Muslims of Bangladesh and Pakistan and what we have in India, they would have outdone the Hindus democratically, and they would have been a big power. This argument doesn't work because Muslims were and are demographically so sparse in India that they cannot effectively make a change. To this day, how many Muslim MPs do we have in the Indian Parliament? We have nearly 300 million Muslims in India. And they are all divided. They are all divided demographically, not necessarily ideologically, but demographically. They are all in different places. Okay, that's why they cannot have an impact democratically. They have to vote for Hindu candidates, those who favor them.
National Congress or BJP.
Yes, exactly. They have to vote for them because they have no other option. A Muslim candidate would simply not win because the majority wouldn't vote for him. Majority is either on the side of Congress, which is secular, liberal type Hindus, okay, or the extreme right-wing, ultra nationalist Hindus voting for someone like BJP. So people are very naive when they claim that if Muslims were to be in a democracy, and I don't agree with the
Jamaat-e-Islami.
The Jamaat-e-Islami or the scholars of Deoband that we would have been better off. No, I believe Iqbal, people like Iqbal, Sir Sayyid, Jinnah, they knew better. They knew better. They knew what was coming. They knew a train was heading their way and it was going to hit them so hard that they would never be able to recover. Like what's happening in India today. How much difference have the Muslims, unfortunately, have made in India? Not because Muslims are incompetent, not because Muslims are incapable. Muslims are
But purely due to opportunity, not much at all.
No, because they are marginalized, systematically marginalized from politics.
But Indian Muslims can easily turn around and say, well, look at the bloody state of Pakistan. Pakistan itself is not. It's also can be argued that it's a failed state.
Okay, in Pakistan, as failed a state it might be.
Yeah.
Okay, I don't believe it's a failed state. It's a nuclear power which is still standing firmly on its feet. Okay, it's enduring all the challenges. It's surrounded by enemies. Okay, and it has effectively, survived a very dangerous war in Afghanistan. Okay.
Which it also played a key role in.
Yes, absolutely, it had to for its survival. Of course, what do you do? There's a Russian generals are saying we will have our dinner in Karachi.
No.
Okay.
Yeah. The point I'm trying to make is that Indian Muslims can easily posit back to our brothers in Pakistan that you talk about this great freedom of being Muslim or being a land for the Pak. How did 1971 work out for you when your own brothers split away from you? Let me just copy this. So how did that work out? Go speak to your brothers in Bengal. How did the concept of an Islamic Pakistan work out for them? Your economy at the moment is in tatters. You may be a nuclear state, but it appears that you don't really have much control over when you press that button. It's just there to flex your muscle against India. Pakistan, you got Imran Khan currently, who initially appeared to be a breath of fresh air from previous administrations, but nevertheless he's going around with the begging bowl asking for money and handouts. So who are you as a Muslim from Pakistan to tell us Indians that we're in tatters and we're in a dire situation?
Very good questions, valid points. All of them are valid points, and they may be true. Pakistan is economically weak. Pakistan is politically struggling. Pakistan is not a model state for the Muslim Ummah to follow, no doubt. It has many weaknesses, many problems. Okay,
I feel a butt coming.
Sorry?
I feel a butt.
Yeah, but at the same time, in Pakistan, you don't have Muslims being lynched for slaughtering a cow. You have Muslims worshipping as they like, as divided as they may be, or as divided as they are in Pakistan. There is sectarianism in Pakistan. There has been Shia-Sunni sectarianism in Pakistan. It has caused problems in the recent past.
There has been army brutality in the tribal areas.
Unfortunately, yes, there has been some brutality which has caused some, but this brutality was against elements who were trying to completely dismantle the state. They were against the idea of Pakistan. They were trying to destroy the country from within, and they were working for foreign powers. So in order to handle them, the army had to, you can't just sit around. I mean, if you're the guard of a building and you can see someone putting fire to the building, you have to do something, right? And in the process, unfortunately, no doubt, military made mistakes. No doubt. I'm not a spokesperson for the military.
That's fine.
I'm not a spokesperson for the government of Pakistan. They have a lot of improvements to do. There's a lot to improve. But Pakistan still has its Islamic identity. Muslims can walk the streets of Pakistan without fear of persecution. Pakistan basically represents the civilization of Islam in India, which goes back 1,000 years. Okay, Pakistan, I mean, sometimes it's funny to think about it. I mean, I don't necessarily agree with this kind of rhetoric and language, but even the missiles, if you look at the Pakistani military apparatus, okay, what are they called?
They're all named after great Islamic figures,
Muslim heroes, and they're not necessarily heroes. I mean, I don't believe Ghaznavi, Sultan Mahmud Ghaznavi, was necessarily a hero of Islam. Okay, he was a king who was doing what
kings do.
What exactly?
What kings do.
Loot, raid, accumulate wealth, money, and make yourself powerful, and recruit armies to become more powerful. Likewise, Ghoris, they were doing the same thing. The Delhi sultans were doing this. They were not. We're not saying they were angels. So when we try to romanticize them, and we try to paint them as waliullahs on the musalla, crying at night, they were not like that. Some of them used to drink. Some of them were, but they had a lot of ghira for Islam. You cannot take that away from them. Okay, how do we know that? Look at the coins. Look at the coins, the language on the coins. Okay, you don't have that language today in on any coins from the Muslim world. You go to the currency. Of course, Saudi Arabia is an exception because the flag has the Shahada, which they should reconsider because the flag is being desecrated and it's being used for different people, all kinds of things, and that disrespects the Shahada. Okay. But if you look at the Muslim currency today, hardly any country has verses on the Quran or the name of the central uniting entity, the Caliph. Okay, for example, Delhi Sultanate coins. Okay, if you pick them up, you will have the name of the Caliph.
The
Abbasid Caliph, Mustasim. Okay, Al Hakim Billah, for example, his name is there on the coins. And these guys are they have never seen the Caliph, right? But to maintain the Islamic identity and their attachment with the wider Muslim civilization, they represented Islam and Muslims, of course, in a very imperfect way in India. Okay, they were not perfect. Coming back to
the problems of Pakistan.
Yeah, problems of Pakistan. They are there, of course.
Like don't throw. So the saying of "don't throw stones in a glass house" kind of thing. Yeah?
Okay, I accept that. But at the same time, if you do a comparison between current day India and current day Pakistan, I can tell you with confidence, in Pakistan, you will not see the lynching of Hindus. There are hundreds of thousands of Hindus in Pakistan, in the province of Sindh. If a Muslim mob was to attack a Hindu village, you know who would fight against them?
Muslims, probably.
Pakistani Muslims from all over the country would rally to support the Hindus. Okay, this rhetoric on Indian news channels, you hear that, a Hindu girl was kidnapped and she was forced into Islam. So what they're trying to do is they're trying to hide their crimes that are being committed by the current BJP government in India. Some of those crimes are genocidal. They are openly xenophobic, Islamophobic, and barbaric acts of violence against Muslims happening in India. To hide those crimes, what they do is they magnify
one or two
isolated incidents in Pakistan, for example. Okay, it is true there have been miscarriages of justice in Pakistan, possibly against minorities. It is true, it happens. It is a huge country, but what you will not find in Pakistan is a genocide against the minorities. For example, what happened in Gujarat in 2003, what happened against the Sikhs in 1984. Okay, what is happening against Dalits. Okay. Or what is happening against Muslims now, where there is a mob and a Muslim man is being tortured. People are standing by and watching the torture.
Sometimes with police even present.
Police present. You would never see that in Pakistan. Fortunately, I'll give you proof for that. Recently, less than 10 days ago, there was a man who basically incited violence against the Sikhs in Nankana Sahib in Punjab, Pakistani side of Punjab. Okay, and he took a mob of Muslims. Of course, these people are very ignorant. They are farmers and peasants, who work the fields, and they don't know better. Okay, they were unfortunately led by this person, and he went to the Gurdwara, which is a Sikh holy shrine in Nankana Sahib, which is very close to Lahore. And
Was this where Guru Nanak was born?
yes,
Okay.
that's the city, and they were shouting slogans against the Sikhs, and they were threatening the Sikhs. He was immediately locked up. He was picked up by the state, okay, because it happens so quickly. Today social media, something before the police arrives, cameras already there, it's live on Facebook, and people think nothing. Go and see what happened to him. Not only the state, Imran Khan tweeted about this. He said the difference between us and what the Indian government is doing is that we took action against someone who was trying to inspire or instigate violence against the Sikh community, and the state protected the community. On the other hand, we have CMs and prime ministers and
Of India.
making statements, openly Islamophobic, xenophobic statements against a minority, and not doing anything effective against lynchings and violence against Muslims. So thankfully in Pakistan, we have security for Muslims and for non-Muslims. I am telling you, me as a person, as a Muslim living in Britain who happens to come from Pakistan, if there was violence against Christians or Hindus in Pakistan, leave violence alone. Even if someone was to make speeches against Hindus or Sikhs, I would be one of the first people to arrive back in that country, and I would be making public speeches. I would be organizing protests against such elements. Okay, in Pakistan, you do not have anything like that.
So
what you hear on the news in India is all lies, all exaggerated, magnified, just to hide their own crimes.
So I posit the question to you back to why has the ideology of Hindu supremacy become exacerbated and popularized of late? Why has it garnered so much support?
Okay.
Because it has.
Okay.
We can't even call it a 50-50 situation.
I call it jahl, ignorance. The masses, the poor people of India living in the rural areas, they're very poor, very ignorant about anything in life apart from their farming and their villages.
Wanting a Hindu Rashta, is there any theological historical basis from your knowledge of a kind of Hindu state, a purist state?
No. It's a very recent idea which was instigated by the British. The British divided Muslims and Hindus on communal lines to be able to govern India. Okay, they couldn't afford the Hindus and Muslims uniting against the British rule, and when they did, lo and behold, we had independence. Okay, even in the Indian Mutiny 1857,
it was Hindus and Muslims.
Hindus and Muslims fought against the British to gain independence. So the British, more than anyone else, understood that Hindus and Muslims have to be divided. They have to divide for them to be able to govern India for longer. And they created Hinduism. Now, you may be thinking, hold on a second, what are you saying? The British created Hinduism? I am saying the British created Hinduism.
Hinduism as in an ideology.
As an idea to stand against Islamic identity. Hindus are divided previously. Firstly, Hindu is a Persian word. It is not even a Hindu word.
Not from Sanskrit.
It's not Sanskrit. No. Hindu is a Persian word which was used by Persian chroniclers and writers, okay, throughout the Mughal period and beyond, right? So Hindus are divided into Rajputs, Jats, okay, Marathas, okay, this is how they were called.
Brahmins,
okay, so the Brahmins are basically castes, okay, Brahmins, Kshatri, Vaishya, Shudra, these are 4 castes. Shudras are the lowest caste, who were doing the cleaning work and all that, and they were not allowed to. The point I say is,
from your reading of history and from your research or knowledge of this area, has there ever been a time in India where there was a purist Hindu rule?
Never.
Like if you speak to Muslims, you can say under Khulafa al-Rashidin, under Banu
It was attempted by the Marathas.
Okay.
The Marathas were a devastating force in India.
Well, they're celebrated now these days.
They are celebrated for the wrong reasons. If you knew the history of the Marathas were killing as many Hindus as they were killing Muslims. Marathas are not India-loving entity. In fact, we have evidence to the contrary that Muslim sultans, they loved India more than...
The Marathas.
Absolutely. The Muslim sultans who are seen as outsiders, they were more local. They were more of sons of the land than the Marathas.
But the Marathas are being celebrated now.
Because
in Bollywood movies, in entertainment, in academia, they are now being celebrated.
In movies like Ahmad Shah, the Panipat, which is a recent production.
Movie,
Then Bajirao and Mastani,
Yep.
and then we have even another movie about Alauddin Khilji was Padmavati.
Yes, Padmavati.
Okay. So these Hindu rulers of the past, whether they're Maratha or Rajputs, are being celebrated erroneously.
As part of this wider agenda?
Absolutely, to give rise to this Hindu nationalistic feeling and to justify it somehow historically. There is no historical justification. I'm a student of history. I read scholars and I toe that line, scholarly line. I hope I'm not biased and prejudiced.
But it's a massive claim to say that the Marathas don't represent a sentiment of a purist Hindu state.
No, they don't.
Why?
Because they were destroying. Firstly, we have to understand when we study the history of the Marathas.
Yeah.
Who was fighting the Marathas?
The Mughals were fighting Marathas.
This is the misconception.
The
Rajputs were fighting the Marathas.
So were the Mughals.
So were the Jats.
Yeah.
And so were the Hindus of Bengal. Marathas invaded Bengal so many times, and they would simply come in to burn villages, to loot, pollute, and rape. They were notoriously known for raping.
Not to spread Hindu rule.
No. There was nothing about... Marathas had Muslim generals. In the Battle of Panipat, they had a Muslim general on their side.
Okay.
Yes. And Ahmad Shah Abdali had Hindus fighting on his side. So there was no Hindu... of course, there was the religious sentiment that was used, from the Muslim side, which was predominantly Muslim, the Abdali side. Ahmad Shah Abdali was the leader, and there were people like Hafiz Rahmat Khan, the ruler of Rohilla Pathans, and then there were people like Shuja-ud-Dawla, the ruler of the state of Awadh, who was Shia, but he had joined the Muslim coalition, to fight against the greater threat, which was the Marathas. He knew what it would look like if the Marathas came to power in North India. So he fought side by side with the predominantly Muslim army against the Marathas. And then we had Najib-ud-Dawla, another Pathan ruler. So the purpose was to somehow neutralize the Maratha threat. Even Shah Waliullah had written letters to all major Muslim players in the land to highlight the Jat and the Maratha rise. Because what were they doing? They were simply, at that time, they were simply taking land, they were burning, pillaging. They were raiders. Marathas were basically raiders. Marathas were not established rulers. They did rule from Pune, right, in the south or in central India. They had an empire there, no doubt. But as far as North India or Northwest is concerned, they would simply come in, raid, pillage, burn, accumulate wealth, and go back.
Go back to their base.
They occupied Lahore. They came very close to Peshawar, Marathas. Marathas had occupied Delhi at times, and they had committed atrocities. You cannot take that away from them. Marathas were the most devastating force in Indian history in the 18th century. They caused more damage to India than anyone else did. I am saying this with confidence. Marathas destroyed the Mughal Empire. The Mughals made India a single entity. Of course, people claim that Ashoka had done it before in the ancient times. He had occupied all of India. He made it one. Of course, no doubt. But recent times, or recent history, not very far distant from us, Mughals
were the ones that came the closest to bring it to a single entity.
Absolutely. They united India as one entity. India before that was not one entity. There was no such thing as India. There was no India. There was no Bharat. The territory was there, but it was divided into different principalities, governing by different systems. Vijayanagar Empire in the south, which was Hindu. And Hindu in what sense? Following different deities, having different temples, different system altogether to Rajputs in Rajputana, for example, in Rajasthan, current Rajasthan, in this region. They were different to the Hindus of Bengal. And this is why we find, there is a very interesting book written by Richard M. Eaton, who is an American scholar.
What's it called?
On Indian history. The book is called The Persianate Age.
Okay.
The Persianate Age, and he discusses the history of the Persian political authority in India from 1000 to 1700, so almost 700 years. And he talks about this, that how Hindu kings were invading other Hindu territories and desecrating temples of other Hindu kings, because temples were seen as symbols of power
for those respective kings.
So once you demolish the temple, once you break the idol or the deity, then that demoralizes the army and the king, and the king loses power. So Hindus were doing this, right? So Marathas were doing exactly the same thing. They were going into other Hindu territories and they were fighting, and at times they were signing contracts and they were in agreements with Muslims. They had peace with Muslim entities. So Marathas were not necessarily a Hindu representation of power in India in any sense. They did try to revive Hindu Padshaahi, they called it, that we want to install our own emperor in Delhi vis-a-vis the Mughals, so that we can have a Hindu government in India, a Hindu empire. They tried that. They even talked about it. But how Hindu were they is the question. How Hindu were they? They came with their unique form of Hinduism, which was very, very devastating. I mean, you would forget, if you read about Marathas, you would forget about atrocities committed by Nazis, and I mean, I know the comparison is wrong, it can be anachronistic, okay, but you would forget about atrocities committed by ISIS and Nazis and Stalin.
Are there Hindu scholars and historians who say what you say?
Yes, 100%.
Really?
Absolutely. If you read all major Hindu, I don't know how Hindu are they. I mean, they are secular Hindus, or they're liberal Hindus, or whether they're Hindu. I don't know how Hindu they are, but they have Hindu names, and there are scholars who have talked about this.
So do you ever foresee a situation, if the situation doesn't get better for the Muslims of India, do you ever see, you can write Sheikh Hasina off write her off, but do you ever foresee Pakistan allowing some Muslims of India to come and settle?
Absolutely. Why not, if they had to? But it would be very sad if they had to do that. And I believe India is a beautiful country. It's a great country with great minds, great intellectuals, beautiful people, beautiful cultures. Okay, we want India to flourish. We want. I'm speaking as a Muslim. Okay, and I'm very certain that the majority of the Pakistani Muslims and Bengali Muslims share my sentiment in this regard. We want peace in India. If there is peace in India, there's peace in Bangladesh and Pakistan.
Of course.
Okay? We want India to be a peaceful abode. We want to be able to visit India. I want the borders to be opened. There would be trade between Pakistan, India and Bangladesh. Imagine how rich these countries would become. The only reason we do not have this trade or this cordial relationship between the governments, not the people. The people love each other. Believe me, if the borders are lifted, okay, the barriers are lifted, Delhi would be in Lahore within 2 weeks, and Lahore would be in Delhi. Muslims from Pakistan, they would be driving through the border from Lahore.
But he also posits some threats.
Why?
To have such
if you have peace, why would there be threats?
But there can't be peace, because the two very countries were founded upon the antagonism and the existential threat of each other.
Not necessarily. The bitterness came because of Kashmir. Not necessarily. Two countries don't have to be against each other, fighting each other till death. No.
But the founding of those respective states were based upon religious lines, and therefore it poses an existential issue why you can't have such, as idealistic and I'm sure as good as it may be, it also poses threats of Atangwadis and terrorists and raw agents and ISI agents and all kinds of madness happening across borders.
No, this is happening because of the problem of Kashmir. I'm telling you, this all boils down to Kashmir, the Kashmir crisis. If both governments can sit down together, like Imran Khan has been saying repeatedly, that if we sit down and we discuss. But the problem is, how do you discuss with someone like Modi?
But Adnan,
How do you talk to someone like Amit Shah?
But Adnan,
or Yogi Adityanath?
look, let me just ask you something very honest, bro. Yeah. How can a handspan of Kashmir ever legitimately be part of India? It could either be independent or part of Pakistan. That's the way I see it.
Yes.
How can it ever be a part of India?
Yes. It doesn't make sense. And it was annexed by force.
Exactly. So it can only ever be an independent Kashmir, which is of late, last 10, 15 years, they've been seeing a lot more sentiments for it, or a part of Pakistan.
Or let the Kashmiri people decide their fate. Let them, let the international community, which is mostly sleeping when Muslims are being brutalized around the world. Unfortunately, this term international community has become
just a
an insult. It has become an insult when these global leaders use the term international community. It is useless. I'm sorry. When Muslims are being brutalized all over the world, this international community is sleeping. Okay, when a donkey dies somewhere, or when a dog, I mean, rightly so, we need to we need to protect animals as much as we need to protect humans, right? But there is more noise for animal rights around the world for some reason. This is why Muslims need to wake up globally, and they're trying to wake up. Mashallah, recently the Kuala Lumpur summit was a breeze of fresh air. It was very encouraging. The Muslim leaders are now realizing that they need to do something about this, because
which Imran Khan was pressured from not attending.
Unfortunately, there was a mistake. I don't think the Pakistani government should have taken that course. But politics is a very dirty game.
Saudi posited that way will take away 4 million laborers of Pakistan from Saudi and give it to Bangladesh. They will pull out the money that they've deposited to the Pakistan bank, and for that reason, Imran Khan did not attend.
You're right about that, but then Iran was there, and Saudi Arabia does not want to sit with people. I mean, or the regimes like Iran. Iranian regime has completely devastated the region.
But the neo-Ottoman Sultan Erdogan was there also.
Yes,
so
he was.
So what I'm saying is,
I believe he's a better politician. I believe he's a better politician. He knows politics. Okay, and coming back to his condolences sent to Iran for the loss of the general is politics. I'm sure he doesn't sympathize with what he had done in Syria. I am very sure Erdogan does not sympathize with the actions of Iran in Syria, in Yemen, and in Iraq.
So even so you're saying even reportedly referring to Soleimani as a shaheed, reportedly.
Okay.
Is that also siyasat as well?
Yes. Unfortunately, it's politics.
So Sunnis are into political taqiyya then, isn't it?
I wouldn't call it taqiyya. It's politics. It's politics. Donald Trump, okay, or just like President Reagan, okay, praising the Afghan Mujahideen as the noble, and so, to an extent that they had to make Rambo 3 to glorify the Afghan cause. Okay, these very terrorists were at that time heroes. Okay, that was political taqiyya on the part of the government's leaders. Always do it. Okay, they always speak a language where they don't actually mean.
So back to Kashmir.
This is why, hence the claim that they are a bunch of hypocrites. But if they are not hypocrites, and I'm using inverted commas, okay, then how would they govern? If every single leader said his mind and what is in his heart, do you think he would be a leader anymore? People would, so. Do you think Trump states everything
No, you're going to say that. And you knew the answer was yes. He literally does tweet everything in his mind.
I don't think so. I think what he has inside him is far worse than
what he tweets.
What comes out of his mouth. Yes.
So back to Kashmir, right? If you're saying that a lot of the antagonism and the friction and the existential threat is because of Kashmir, how can... I know it's a huge topic. A topic which you touched upon in a previous podcast of our brothers from Islam 21C when the whole Article 370 thing was happening. But how can you ever sit down in a meaningful way about Kashmir when you know the realistic sentiment and outcome of the people of that region will either be Pakistan or independent and never India?
Look, it only makes sense, as you clearly stated. Any sane person looking at Kashmir demographically would simply say it belongs to Pakistan, or
an independent Kashmir.
If the Kashmiris want independence, then it should be an independent Kashmir, because Kashmiris clearly don't want to be governed by India, let alone a BJP government, which has imposed a curfew, which it hasn't lifted to date.
Still there.
Unfortunately, this is a concentration camp, and the world is sleeping. Again, the international community doesn't care about it. They don't care about the Rohingyas. They didn't care about the Rohingyas. They didn't care about what was happening to people in Syria, what's happening in Yemen.
What's
The
happening with the
international community.
Uyghurs.
In fact, they are inflating the fire of war. They are actually pumping money and weapons into this region to inflate the conflict further. Okay, so violence against Muslims is somehow, unfortunately,
Just accept it.
tacitly approved of. It's approved. It is fine. Not enough action should be taken against this violence. But violence by Muslims, rightly or wrongly, okay, we have both problems, unfortunately.
It's top of the agenda.
It's top of the agenda. The Muslims cannot be radicalized. The Muslims have no right to defend themselves. When they do, even the legitimate movements, when they are actually fighting for their survival,
And
for
resisting.
example, and resisting genocide. I'm talking about Rohingya Muslims. They were facing a genocide. Hundreds of thousands of women have been raped. Who cares? In Bengali camps, go and look at them.
Yeah.
Okay, those women who have come
Mass
there,
rape,
they are
systemic rape.
pregnant. Hundreds. I'm saying hundreds of thousands. Okay, go and watch Al Jazeera reports, BBC reports, BBC, which is seen to be relatively biased against Muslims, unfortunately. Okay, people think that, and I don't know how true that is.
Their propaganda is far more sophisticated.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
BBC is the
Yes.
most sophisticated
Yes.
propaganda outlet in the world.
Absolutely. I agree. So, something needs to be done about Kashmir. Kashmir is a very, very disturbing case, and the world is sleeping on it. And there are two nuclear powers standing against each other. As Imran Khan warned in the United Nations, when he did his speech, that it is not a simple matter. You need to think about these two nuclear armed states. If they were to fight each other over this territory, what would happen to the world? These are not the bombs of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. This is different technology. Okay, this is different technology. This is a completely different game altogether. Okay, the world needs to take it seriously. Just like the Iran and U.S. tensions need to be taken seriously, and everyone needs to calm down because innocent people will die. I know what's going to happen. Okay, America will come with its might, with all the weapons and all the missiles to try new technology on the people of Iran and the people of Iraq and the people of the region at large. And Iran will retaliate. Who will die?
The
Innocent
civilians,
people.
innocent people
We
die.
don't want that. We don't want wars. We want peace. We want peace in the world. That's why we hope that India comes to its senses. We hope sanity, morality, and justice prevails in India. Those people who are supporting and backing the Muslim cause, and it's not the Muslim cause, by the way. This is a war. This is a battle for the soul of India. This is what the people are saying. This is a battle for the soul of India. It's the survival of India. Does India want to become a Nazi-style, xenophobic, hateful, bigoted,
It's already there.
violent state?
It's already become.
It is already. Currently, it is, unfortunately. Or does India want to become a progressive, enlightened, peaceful,
inclusive state.
inclusive state that leads the world in all these areas?
If it carries on the way it is,
Yeah.
if the trajectory continues the way it is, do you see the birth of Muslim resistance who will take to arms to protect their communities? And
I hope it doesn't come to that. I don't like to talk about war. I am.
No, but it's a
I'm
reality.
not a pacifist. I believe in Islam.
But it happens
its
everywhere.
totality.
It happens everywhere because we see that there were pockets of resistance amongst the Rohingya. There were pockets of resistance amongst the Uyghurs. There's resistance in Kashmir.
I
There's
believe
resistance.
Muslims will be the victims if anything like that happens in India. And I really hope it doesn't come to that. I really hope that the current movement is successful and this government is, we get rid of this government and somehow I hope it is voted out in the next election in India and someone who is sensible comes to power so that we can resolve the Kashmir issue and then reduce xenophobia in this politics of hate and communalism, right? I really hope that. I really hope it doesn't come to that. But if it came to that, it's a big if, then the Muslims will be the victims. Okay? Muslims are a minority. They are scattered. They are very weak economically. Most Muslims are poor. They're very poor. And even the rich Muslims are very marginalized. They're very, very much cornered. So I hope it doesn't come to that, because Muslims will be the losers in this. Okay. But again, if someone's coming to your house
to your
trying
area, to your community,
trying
to
to
your
rape
shops.
your daughter in front of your eyes, you have to defend your daughter. You have to defend your family. And I hope it doesn't come to that. Yeah.
Bringing the podcast to a kind of a close, you said something earlier in the podcast. You said, how Hindu were the Marathas? So I ask you, how Islamic were the Mughals?
The Mughals,
With exception to Aurangzeb.
okay, the Mughals were Islamic when it suited them, with the exception of Aurangzeb. Okay, other Mughals used Islam to their advantage. For example, Akbar used Islam to his advantage, and then he abandoned Islam altogether. He apostatized, and in fact, he was.
Is there any Ijma on this, by the way?
Absolutely.
There's a consensus that Akbar was a Murtad.
Absolutely, there is historical consensus on this. I mean, what do you mean Murtad? I mean, he initiated a new religion called Deen Ilahi. It was published on his coins. So if you look at his early coins from the early part of his reign, I wish I could. You even reminded me to bring some coins. But I think what we can do in the future, inshallah, we can do a podcast
Assessing your coins.
Yes, specifically looking at some of the Islamic coins and history around them, because there's a lot to talk about with numismatic evidence. Okay, a lot. You will see theology, you will see politics in the coins.
Really?
Absolutely.
No, because minting is a representative of the thinking of respected
You will
rulers.
see in the quality of silver. Where did the silver come from? The messages on the coins, the propaganda, the name of the king, why, the military element. Okay, coins minted on march, for example. There are mints on march. The army is on the move and the coins are being minted in the camp. And there's a mint called Urdu Zafar Kareen. Okay, that means the military mint, which is on the move.
Yep.
So those coins. So there's a lot to talk about. Coming back to the issue of
how Islamic were the Mughals.
So Jahangir obviously made Tawbah, Akbar's son, and he. To a large extent, he disowned his father's legacy and became a Muslim, right? But how Muslim was he? He was a drunkard. He was into music, okay, and he was just an Indian king. You know, when these bigots talk about Mughals being the embodiment of Islam, they don't know what they're talking about. Even the first Mughal emperor, Babur, was into drinking. He confessed to this in his Babarnama, in his memoir, personal memoir. Humayun was an opium addict. Okay, one of the reasons people believe he died was because he
did these rulers acknowledge what they were doing was sinful?
Of course, absolutely, they acknowledged this, and they were very mystical as well. They had Islam in them, no doubt. You cannot take Islam away from any of them, apart from Akbar. They all had elements of Islam to their characters, all of them. In fact, they had ghira for Islam, including Babur. Look at his coins. It has Shahada on it. Okay? Humayun, the same thing, right? Akbar had Shahada and the name of the 4 caliphs on his coins.
In terms of their governance then?
In terms of the governance, because they governed largely Hindu domain, they did not impose Islam on the Hindus. Islam was never imposed. When people say jizya was imposed on the Hindus...
Did they have jizya?
That doesn't... Of course, yes. Yes, jizya was there.
And did they apply to the
Akbar
Hindus?
abolished it.
Okay.
Akbar abolished it, and Aurangzeb reinstated it in
Did they have hudud?
16th century. Partly, yes. Yes, they were there. Of course, during the Delhi Sultanate period, hudud were partially implemented where it was possible.
What about the Mughals?
The Mughals is a very complicated situation. You see, Mughals never got the chance to do it. Why? Because their history was full of so much turmoil. Babur only governed for 4 years. He could barely consolidate his power. Humayun governed for 10 years, and then he was ousted by his general Sher Shah Suri, who was very Islamic. So within the Muslim domain, they had Islamic principles governing them. Okay, these principles were not imposed on Hindus. Hindus were simply left alone to govern by their own systems, and they were vessels. They were vessels to the Mughals, right? And they paid taxes to the Mughals like all other principalities. Muslims and non-Muslim, when they became under the Mughal rule, they would pay taxes to the central treasury, right? So as far as the Mughal household was concerned, they were governed by a mixture of Islamic Turkic and Persianate protocol. I don't know if that makes sense.
Yeah,
to understand that, you will have to read some of the books.
No, because even the Ottomans,
Yeah.
We had this conversation
Yeah.
not too long ago
Yeah.
over doner kebab. The Ottomans also had a number of Turkic values and principles which they didn't feel was in conflict with
When we say
with Islam.
Turkic, just to clarify for the audience,
Not modern day Turkey. Turkic.
Turkic means Central Asian
Turks.
protocols.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So there were certain, obviously, tribalistic values and principles and that they didn't feel was in conflict with their conception of Islam. So they kept those things as part of their systems.
Yes.
In the same way in which when Umar ibn Khattab, radiallahu anhu, when they took over the lands of Persia, there's certain systems which they kept. Are we in agreement with that?
Yes. I mean, one example in the case of the Ottomans is the strangling of all the siblings.
Yeah, the fratricide.
The fratricide element of the Ottoman.
But the ulama
system.
justified that by saying that the death of one prince is better than the death of the...
No, because they were actually facing devastation. A lot of these princes would completely devastate the state, fighting for...
No, that policy was born out of the Ottoman interregnum where Sultan Murad's 3 sons went to war with each other.
Yes.
Nearly destroyed the entire state.
After the death of Bayezid,
Yep.
Sultan Bayezid, his 3 sons
Yeah.
fought each other, and then Ottoman
That's
Empire
the
nearly
Sultan
crumbled.
Bayezid's, yeah.
The Ottoman Empire nearly crumbled.
So the ulama came and they said that, look, it's actually better to kill respective princes than...
But later on, it was they realized.
Yeah, Sultan
that it
Ahmed
was-
abandoned that.
Yeah,
Sultan
abandoned that,
Ahmed
and then
abandoned
they used imprisonment
Or
instead
exile.
of exile or
Yeah.
imprisonment
Yeah.
as a better option. But this option was absolutely barbaric, of
Okay.
course, and it came from the Turks
Yeah.
rather than
Exactly,
Islam.
yes.
But they tried to Islamify it.
Islamify,
But they
justifying
failed. They failed.
Yeah.
Okay, even they found. I mean, as barbaric or as uncivilized by our standards,
Yeah.
those times were. Even they had,
Yeah.
problems with this. Hold on,
Yeah.
how do we rationalize
Yeah.
this behavior, fratricide? But in the case of the Mughals, who also followed Turkic system, because Mughals were originally Turkic.
Yeah, Turco-Persian,
Turco-Persian. They also had concerns about wars of succession, because when the emperor would die, these sons would fight it out. They would have to, and they had this slogan, this principle they lived by. All the Mughal princes, each prince was an establishment in himself. Some of the Mughal princes, the provinces they governed, were larger than Pakistan and Bangladesh put together today. For example, one Mughal prince would be given Gujarat. It's a huge region. Another one would be given Deccan. Deccan is all of South India. Then one would be the governor of Bengal. It's huge territory. Bengal.
Are you saying that they were autonomous rulers of those respective
They were
provinces?
semi-autonomous. They answered back to the emperor
Yeah.
in Delhi or Agra. Okay, and they would have to obey the emperor. And if they rebelled against the emperor would muster his might and army. He would, and amazingly, you see Hindu generals in the political and the military landscape of the Mughal Empire all the way. They are always present. They are never marginalized. They are never basically discriminated against in the sense that, oh, you're a Hindu, you cannot get involved in our fight. No, there were Hindu Rajas with their own armies who joined the Mughal cause, and they were in some cases they were more loyal to the Mughals than the Mughals themselves, because a Mughal prince is fighting against father, and who's fighting the prince?
Yeah.
The Hindu king,
generals, yeah.
a Rajput Hindu king fighting the Mughal prince for the Mughal emperor. And he's losing his own Hindu men to keep the emperor on throne.
Yeah.
These things are not known, unfortunately, to the masses. They are brainwashed. They're conditioned. This is why history, real history, has to be taught. And historians are going through a lot of trouble in India. True historians, objective historians, they can't even speak their mind in India anymore. Okay, Audrey Trushk, the lady who has written this recent book on Aurangzeb Alamgir, an introduction to Aurangzeb's life. Aurangzeb is a very good book. It's a must-read for the Muslims of India in particular, and the Muslims of the world at large.
Because Aurangzeb is someone, rahimahullah, is someone who's actually consistently now of late being demonized.
Yes,
as an ISIS.
not even now. Demonization of Aurangzeb started during the British period,
But it's happening a lot now.
and that
It's revived now.
that historical tradition, which was very biased.
That he was radical, he was extreme, he implemented Sharia laws, he oppressed Hindus,
When did this narrative come about? Is the
As you
question.
mentioned, the British period.
During the colonial period, the British, particularly, specifically, systematically created this narrative to divide the Muslims and the Hindus. So to get the Hindus to hate the Muslim past of India, they created villains like Aurangzeb and Tipu Sultan. Okay?
Who are two of our heroes.
Yes, absolutely.
They are
absolutely.
heroes.
And then the Muslims inflated their legacies to counter that narrative.
As a reaction to that.
As a reaction to that. But the truth is in the middle. The truth is in the middle. The British narrative, unfortunately, the colonial British narrative was adopted some early 20th century historians in India, such as Jadunath Sarkar. Okay, he upheld that narrative of Aurangzeb's barbarity and his extremism and all that. Okay, and then later on, the BJP government adopted that narrative. But the historians, the real historians, people like, for example, Mudiger, for example, people like Richard Eaton, okay, F.F. Richards, okay, Audrey Trusk, Munis Farooqi, okay, and Irfan Habib, all these people, major Indian historians who have written on the history of India. I'm talking about Indian as well as Western historians. They are all unanimous on one point, that the BJP government's narrative of history is redundant. It is ahistorical. It is not history. It is bigotry. They are all unanimous on this. All major serious historians. They don't see history in black and white. History has trends. It has nuances, which bigotry and prejudice fails to detect, unfortunately. So for this reason, we must study the history of the Mughals more carefully. And they were far more complex than one may think today.
Are you then saying that for the Mughals, the attempt to perhaps Islamize or implement Sharia and implement Islam was far more difficult because they were a minority always amongst a majority Hindu state?
Sorry, repeat that question.
Would you then suggest that the Ottomans were successful? Because for all their faults and shortcomings, and whenever I discuss the topic of history in my articles and lectures, I always say that never do Muslims or should Muslims present our civilizations as utopia. Would you agree?
100%.
Because once you do that, there will be so many instances where it was not a utopia.
Absolutely.
Internal war, unjust rulers.
We must talk about all the atrocities committed by some of the Muslim kings.
Because it happened.
What we can talk about is the general pattern of the Muslim civilization.
Exactly.
Okay. Comparatively, it was a
trends,
lot better.
patterns, and themes.
Yes.
Ghira and an aspiration to rule by certain sets of principles.
The patronage of civilized pastimes.
Yes.
For example, Muslim kings in India repeatedly, provided patronage to art, calligraphy, scientific advancement, copying of manuscripts, all sorts of things, monuments, architecture. Okay, some of the most beautiful monuments in India are Muslim monuments. Qutub Minar is an epitome of Islamic art.
Again, I think historians would even testify that whether it's Mughal India or whether it's Abbasid Baghdad or Umayyad Andalus, there was always an attempt to contribute, and not just contribute, but to uplift the intellectual standards of humanity.
Absolutely,
right?
100%. That was the general pattern of the Muslim civilization.
Okay, but that said, the Ottomans, from late to mid 15th century, all the way up to Khalifa Abdul Hamid's time, there is an entire archive in Turkey where there was a strong emphasis in ruling by Islam, ruling by Hanafi fiqh and its codification of Sharia, etc., right? And there was a massive emphasis in the Ottoman rulers, re-exerting themselves as khulafa of the Islamic domains, etc. You said to me off camera a couple of days ago that journey was starkly different for the Mughals because of their demographic reality.
Absolutely. Mughals were governing a completely different world to the Ottomans. The Ottomans were predominantly ruling
either
Muslims.
Either Muslims, the Muslims, or Christians in
Look,
in
Central
Europe.
Asia, for example, Asia Minor is predominantly Muslim. By the time Ottomans come to power, Asia Minor is already Muslim.
So was North Africa.
The Byzantines lost Asia Minor in the 11th century. Okay, the Battle of Manzikert in 1071.
With the Seljuks.
The Seljuks won the battle, and the Byzantines had to abandon Asia Minor.
Yeah.
So by the time Ottomans come to power in 1299, if you wanna put your.
But
finger
Asia
on it.
Minor, guys, we're talking about modern day Anatolia.
Anatolia, modern day Turkey,
Yep.
the landmass of
Yep,
Turkey,
yep.
right? Because people think Turkey is Istanbul.
No,
No,
it's
Istanbul
not.
is just a
it's just a
dot.
part that
Yeah,
on the
right.
European side. That's it.
Exactly. So this was already Muslim, right? So Ottomans were predominantly governing a Muslim domain where it was needed for them to implement Islam. Okay, but with the Mughals were governing an immense
Landmass, which is predominantly Hindu.
which was predominantly Hindu. So the Muslims have always been a minority in this domain that governed for nearly 8 centuries.
So what made Aurangzeb rahimahullah unique to all other Mughal sultans?
Okay,
What made him unique?
Aurangzeb did not enforce Islam on the Hindus. This is a huge misconception.
But he introduced
He
that
did
in
not
Islam.
forcefully convert anyone. This is a lie again, peddled by BJP-inspired, pseudo historians or pseudo intellectuals. Okay, Aurangzeb did not have a policy to force Islam upon anyone. He did impose jizya, okay, which in my opinion was not pragmatic for him to do that. Okay, that caused problems. But why did he do that? Historians discuss it. He did that to punish the Rajputs for their rebellions, because the Rajputs, they started to rebel against Aurangzeb at that time. They found him to be weak. He was involved in the south, fighting some of the. Aurangzeb moved to the south in the 80s, 1680s. Jizya was imposed in 1676, right? And it was done as a response to some of the Rajput rebellions.
So as a
in
form
the
of
north,
punishment.
in the north, as a form of punishment, he did this. Okay, but he didn't want to convert the Hindus to Islam.
But he did have an. But he did
He
have an
actually
agenda.
funded temples. Did you know that?
I didn't know that.
From the state treasury, there are farmans. Okay,
That's pretty crazy.
It's online. Okay, if you Google Aurangzeb funding temples, you will go to a website where you will see Persian documents, original documents, where he funded the repair or the restoration of temples. And he did not, when people say he was out to demolish temples, again, this is another lie, a misrepresentation of history. He did. If he wanted to demolish all the temples in his domain, there would be no temples in India.
But he did seek to kind of minimize or at least abolish things like the proliferation of drinking, opium, music, public bathing, and these,
within the Muslim domain.
Within the Muslim domain.
Okay, this has to be clarified.
Yeah.
People think this was all over the.
Within
the Hindus were still into. In fact, a scholar, she has written an article on suppression of music during the reign of Aurangzeb. She has argued, to the contrary, music became more it became more prominent as a pastime during the reign of Aurangzeb than ever before. Why? Because more scholars, more musicians, more people were getting involved in music during the reign of Aurangzeb. One of the incidents is cited very often to paint Aurangzeb as an enemy of music in India. Okay, he couldn't suppress music within the Hindu community. Hindus love music.
So you're saying these things he implemented in Muslim domains?
Within the Muslim domain. Okay, none of this shenanigans in his court. Basically, bowing to the emperor. They called it Cornish. Basically, you bow to the emperor and wave your hand three times.
Yeah.
He abolished all that you do not bow to anyone other than Allah. Okay, he lived a very simple life. This is testified to by European travelers who saw him in his simplicity. People like Bernier, people like Manucci, okay, who was a physician, an Italian physician who was working within the Mughal court at the time. People like Tavernier as well. We have European travelers who had traveled through the Mughal world at the time, and they were completely blown away by the might and the splendor of the Mughal Empire. The Europeans at the time were so shocked at the splendor of the Mughal Empire that they had to come back and they had to tell their people, you don't know what you're losing. You need to trade with India so that you can. And then the Dutch East India Company, then the British East India Company, and then lo and behold, that's another history. To see what happened after that, you must read William Dalrymple's The Anarchy, his new book. Very, very powerful book, very important. Although he said negative things about Aurangzeb Alamgir in this book, for political reasons, because he lives in India and he wants to stay in India. So we can give him the benefit of the doubt that he was doing it for his safety and well-being in India. Because Audrey Trusk, who is also an historian and she has written this book on Aurangzeb, she actually, picked on this particular issue, that why did you follow that redundant narrative on Aurangzeb in your book Anarchy, which is well researched otherwise, but when it comes to Aurangzeb, you're painting him as a villain. Why is that? And it is clear that he did that too.
To conclude on this specific issue, if we were to have a comparative look at the Mughal Empire and the Ottoman Empire, and both Dawla and both states, and we look at the way in which they governed, by the rules in which they governed, in which they implemented it both in the lands and domains where it was predominantly non-Muslim and Muslim, would it be fair to say, for whatever contextual reasons and nuances, that the Ottomans, their governance was far more Islamic than that of the Mughals?
I would say Ottomans were more Islamically driven than the Mughals were. I would say that. I would accept that. You know why? Because the Ottomans are facing a completely different reality. Their expansion was into, at that time, non-Muslim territory, and they justified their expansion by using Islamic literature, and that's why they had to adopt this Islamic identity, to instill the passion within the forces. In India, that wasn't the case, because Indian forces or Indian armies are far more mixed than Ottoman. So the Mughals were facing a completely different reality. So perhaps it is not fair to compare the two. They both played immensely important roles within the making of the Islamic civilization globally.
And they both had a lot of similarities.
A lot of similarities.
Turco-Persian heritage. They were both Hanafi.
Yes.
They were both, identify themselves either Maturidi or Ashari, but they were both considered themselves.
And Sufi inclined.
Sufi inclined.
Very much Sufi inclined.
So they had a lot of similarities.
Absolutely. A lot of similarities. They were far apart from each other geographically, but at the same time, both dynasties are hugely important, and I beg the Muslims to wake up. I beg for the Muslims to wake up. Please wake up.
Because many of their challenges are relevant to our situation
our situations today, and please study to take inspiration from their legacies, their positive legacies, and disown their mistakes. Completely not repeat them, because they made many mistakes.
Sure.
They did many things that we cannot own today. We cannot say, these things are right. So we have to wake up to our history, take lessons from their legacies, and take inspiration at the same time.
Adnan bhai, jazakallah khair for your presence, for your contribution for today's podcast. I find it very beneficial, and it's always a pleasure to discuss history, especially with you. Every Blood Brothers podcast ends by giving 3 options to our guests. It was inspired by the early call of the Sahaba and those who used to go to new lands and say, accept Islam, pay the jizya, or it's war. But obviously we don't do that with our Muslim guests, and I don't think things could be applied on a podcast in that way. But what we tend to tell our guests...
We don't live in those times anymore.
We may see those times again. You don't know. Maybe not in our lifetime. We may see those times again. Don't worry about the political correctness, yeah? But usually I offer an arm wrestle or a thumb war, or you have to try some bond with me.
Okay.
I'll let you choose.
I'll go for the pan.
Go for the pan, yeah?
I would rather not arm wrestle.
Do you think you'd beat me?
No, I think I'm not. What was that, tobacco? No. I hope not.
Why would I give you that?
It looked.
It's betel nut and it's leaf.
Okay, guys.
It's kora, but it's not got the tobacco.
This is to revive the legacy of the Mughals of India. Bismillah.
Brothers and sisters, jazakallah khair for tuning in. Please share this video, like the video, leave a comment. For our viewers from North America, subscribe to the Mad Mamluks channel. And until next time, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi.
Blood Brothers Podcast, a 5 Pillars of Mad Mamluks production.
Would you eat it?
Yeah. It's not much of a pan, man. This is only the leaf and the chalia.